So here we are for the lecture on philosophy, the introductory lecture on philosophy and conspiracy theories. We can call it "Connect the Philosophy of Connecting the Dots" for fun. There, I'm sure everyone finds that just hilarious. Let's get started with a couple of discussion questions. So for each of these, just think about, how you would answer these at the outset here. First, what's an example of a theory generally considered a conspiracy theory, or that you consider a conspiracy theory? There are many things you might point to here, but just give us an example of a theory that's generally considered a conspiracy theory. Then when you think of a conspiracy theory, how do you think of it specifically? What image comes to mind when you think of a conspiracy theorist, and what kinds of things make a theory a conspiracy theory? What kind of features does the theory have to have in order for it to qualify as a conspiracy theory? And then lastly, when others in everyday life or you yourself use the term conspiracy theory, how is that being used? What do you mean exactly by that? As best you can, at least at this point initially, again, try to define that precisely. And does it include a dismissive use, or is it used more neutrally? In other words, when you talk about conspiracy theories, are you describing the theory, or are you also maybe describing it and evaluating the theory in the definition itself? So those would be some things that we can use to get started thinking about the philosophy of conspiracy theory. So just take a minute and answer each of those for yourself.
Hey, I know what's wrong with your truck. It's your quote-unquote pollution controls. I heard on talk radio you don't even need them. They're just an egghead government plot.
How is cutting down on pollution a government plot, Dale?
Open up your eyes, man. They're trying to control global warming. Get it? Global.
So what?
That's code for UN commissars telling Americans what temperature it's going to be in our outdoors. I say let the world warm up. See what Boutros golly thinks about that. We'll grow oranges in Alaska.
Dale, you giblet head. We live in Texas. It's already 110 in the summer, and if it gets 1 degree hotter, I'm going to kick your ass. What in God's name is that thumping sound?
So when I asked you what image comes to mind when you think of a conspiracy theorist, it may have been something, or it's maybe even likely that it was something like this fella here. We often, in popular media and popular opinion, have this idea of a conspiracy theorist as a paranoid, irrational, unhinged, and maybe even a mentally unwell, crazy person, right? Who believes these things that are wild and fantastic. And the idea being, that belief in conspiracy theories as such is, deeply irrational and flawed. Of course, there are people in our world who espouse conspiracy theories. So, for example, here's on the left-hand side here, we have David Icke, who's a British well-known conspiracy theorist. And on the right, we have American conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, who you may be familiar with. If you're not familiar with Icke, Jones was recently, convicted of... I forget exactly what he was convicted of. I'd have to go back and double check. But he's basically being bankrupted by a court decision by parents of Sandy Hook children who sued him. These are actual... There are people in our world who believe these sorts of things and who are often disparaged as, unhinged and irrational folks. And then, of course, it has to be kind of clear to all of us that conspiracy theories are a major topic for us. They do influence people to do things. So there are people who believe that, Donald Trump is a Russian asset. There are people who believe that 9/11 was an inside job that was done by the Bush administration or by other elements in the government at the time. There's the famous JFK shooting conspiracy, who assassinated him. And the Pizzagate is another recent conspiracy theory. So this gentleman drove, he believed the conspiracy, or at least believed it enough to want to go check it out and see whether there was an actual basement where people were doing ritualistic, baby murder at the bottom of this, in the basement of this pizza shop. Turns out there's no basement in that pizza shop, right? And then, of course, we all have to worry about whether Taylor Swift is a Pentagon psyop, who's trying to influence politics. There are several, of course, issues that pop up that are philosophical issues that arise because of conspiracy theories, and they include things like, how are we going to properly define a conspiracy theory? By this point in the semester, you've probably already seen philosophers worried about how to define things precisely, well, more precisely than our dictionary or lexical definitions define them. And there are often conceptual debates over how to define things precisely. We need to worry about whether it's always irrational or epistemically vicious to believe a conspiracy theory, or it might in some cases be the reasonable thing to believe. We need to worry about possible moral and political values related to conspiracy theories and whether they're harmful or not, or are they just kind of, in forms of entertainment, right? We can worry about whether there's a relationship between conspiracy theories and propaganda and echo chambers, right? Also, some ideas we've likely covered this semester already. And a couple of key distinctions to keep in mind as you're going through the material on philosophy of conspiracy theories. The first is, and it does have to do with how we define conspiracy theories and whether or not they're irrational or not, and it's this debate between the generalists and the particularists. The generalists think that there's something, generally, as the label implies pretty strongly there, incorrect and deeply flawed about conspiracy theories. And the particularists, they're more sympathetic and think that we have to take each conspiracy theory on its own merits before we can evaluate it. And again, kind of dovetailing with that notion is the difference between the minimalist definition of a conspiracy theory and the more propaganda-style definition of a conspiracy theory. Either where conspiracy theories are themselves forms of propaganda, or a definition of conspiracy theory that smuggles in, maybe implicitly or maybe more overtly, an evaluation of conspiracy theories as such. So we need to worry about those sorts of issues from a philosophical standpoint. Picking up on some of that often involve abductive reasoning or other forms of inductive reasoning. We've encountered this type of reasoning earlier in the semester in the logic section, but just as a quick refresher, it's a non-deductive, abductive reasoning or argumentation is a non-deductive or inductive type of argument that tries to establish a theory is likely to be the case if it's the best explanation of some phenomenon, also known as reasoning to the best explanation. And so we're worried about, which of the explanations that present itself or that are viable explanations, which of them is the best explanation, which does the best job of explaining the phenomena and is therefore most likely to be true. So there's an initial difficulty in evaluating these sorts of things because there's usually more than one explanation or theory that we have to wade through. At the very least, these theories need to be internally consistent as well as cohere with well-established facts and other theories. And then we might also worry about Occam's razor here. All things being equal, the most elegant or simplest explanation is typically the correct argument or the correct view. What simplest or elegant here means the one with the fewest assumptions. So sometimes it's put lex parsimony in Latin, which means basically don't multiply assumptions beyond necessity. So if one theory has one assumption in it and another theory has 10, the one that has 10 has 9 more ways to go wrong than the one that only has one assumption. So the elegant one is to be preferred, all things being equal. And then we've got a basic template for this sort of reasoning. So we've got some phenomena, some event, right, that occurs. The Twin Towers fall down, or the universe is expanding at a given rate. All the bodies in space are moving away from each other at a given rate. If hypothesis H were true, then H would provide the best explanation of that. Thus, it's likely that that theory is true. And then here's just an example, a really kind of brief example of a little bit of abductive reasoning. in a different area of philosophy, the philosophy of mind, with the mind-body problem, where Jeffrey Olin argues for a materialistic view of the world, or excuse me, not just of the world, but of the human person, versus dualistic views of the person, where there's this problem of how a non-physical mind relates to the physical body. Well, he proposes reductive materialism as a more elegant explanation of the correspondence that we observe between mental states and brain states compared to the dualistic views. So with that idea and that little bit of background in mind, let's turn to the conventional wisdom on conspiracy theories. And again, think of your own answers to those questions that I posed at the outset. Here we have Karl Popper, a passage from his influential work, Conjectures and Refutations. Popper was a influential philosopher of science, said that what marks out of scientific theory is its falsifiability. And in his Conjectures and Refutations, he gives basically an academic voice to what we'll call the conventional wisdom. Namely, the conspiracy theory of society is a typical result of the secularization of a religious superstition. The belief in the Homeric gods, whose conspiracies explain the history of the Trojan War, is gone. And in their place are a powerful group of men, sinister pressure groups whose wickedness is responsible for all the evils we suffer from, such as the learned elders of Zion, the monopolist or the capitalist or the imperialist, right? Kind of referring to global elite conspiracy theories there. So Karl Popper there kind of gives us that conventional wisdom. And, again, a lot of conspiracy theories aren't taken very seriously in intellectual circles for this sort of reason. It's viewed just as religious superstition, or something like, as he says, the secularization of religious superstition. So it's superstition. We don't need to take it serious. Right. And then one of the things we'll do in this unit is worry about whether that popular opinion or conventional wisdom about conspiracy theories is correct or not. So, again, many people, including philosophers like Popper, seem to hold the view that something's inherently flawed or irrational, ridiculous, or crazy, so forth, about all conspiracy theories and belief in any conspiracy theory. And so one of our basic questions here will be whether that conventional wisdom or popular wisdom about conspiracy theories is correct. Thinking about the argument forms that we have already learned, we can kind of state the conventional wisdom in a basic argument form. So let's just call this the conventional wisdom argument. And I've formulated it here as just a simple little one-stage modus ponens argument. So the first premise is, if a theory qualifies as a conspiracy theory, then it is irrational, implausible, or otherwise unworthy of consideration in reasoned debate about events. Theory X, pick your favorite theory that might be a conspiracy theory, qualifies as that kind of theory. Thus, that theory is irrational, implausible, or otherwise unworthy of consideration in reasoned debate about events. So, as we go through the readings, as you go through the readings and other assigned content for this unit in the class, pay special attention to whether the authors are sympathetic with or criticize the popular view or conventional wisdom about conspiracy theories. The popular view, or what we're going to call the conventional wisdom view, that fits more with the generalist view of conspiracy theories. And so really we're going to test that generalist view that kind of seems built into conventional wisdom or popular opinion about conspiracy theories. So again, keep this argument in mind, and when you're going through the different readings, think about whether those authors are endorsing something like this argument, or whether they are criticizing something along the lines inside this argument. And of course, key issues to pay attention to are how they define conspiracy theories and how they do so in a more precise way, and how that influences, and how that plays the role of a reason for or against the conventional wisdom regard to conspiracy theories. And so with that, we kind of conclude our little introduction to this topic here, and you can get started reading some of the particular articles that have been assigned in this unit. So we'll see you next time, and have fun reading about conspiracy theories.